Good evening, citizens, councils, and staff. I call the City Council meeting of February 21st, 2017 to order. Clerk Hefner, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Beckman.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brinkman.
Here.
Councilmember Cernanik.
Present.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Cole.
Here.
Councilmember Hopping.
Here.
Councilmember Valdez.
Present.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The agenda has been posted and presented to City Council. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? This brings us to agenda item 4, public comment. And for those folks that keep up with council pretty regularly over the years, we've tried different ways of trying to facilitate a public comment that seemed to make the best of meeting time and make the best of giving people the opportunity to speak to the issues. We were doing 2 times and it became awkward. We changed that with our vote at the last regular session, and now we're going to do 1 public comment. The public comment is an opportunity for anyone to express opinions or to ask questions. They just cannot be part of the public hearings, and we have 2 public hearings tonight. So if you look at your agenda and you are here to talk to a public hearing issue, I ask that you wait then so that we can make sure that it's part of the public hearing for that issue. We would like your comments to be civil. Disrespectful behavior is not tolerated. There's a 3-minute time limit. I have several folks who have signed up. The first one will be Isaac Ernstein. Does he need to hook in to the computer there? Sure. There, put your name on.
Okay.
It'll come on in a moment. The man in the control booth has to push a few buttons there. Okay, it's on, Isaac.
Hello, my name is Isaac Ernstein, and I am an 8th grader at McIntosh Academy. Welcome to my presentation for A Flag for Littleton. So, what is a flag? A flag is a cloth representation of a sovereign area, idea, or movement. They can translate what it represents to the viewer quickly and at a great distance. Why do flags matter? Colorado has a great flag. Walk 1 step into a Colorado gift shop and you'll see 100 different items relating to and based on our fantastic flag. Whether in a logo, painting, keychain, or souvenir, the Colorado flag is beautiful and omnipresent. Nebraska, on the other hand, just days ago had their flag hung upside down at the U.S. Capitol for 10 days, which is accompanied by a quote from State Senator Burke Harr. Nobody noticed it. A flag which represents 1.9 million people was hung upside down at the most official building in our country. How are good flags designed? Keep it simple. Flags should be easy to pick out from 250 feet away on a pole in a gale and a foot away on a computer screen. Use meaningful symbolism. The colors, patterns, and symbols should represent the people, place, or organization it is meant to be flown by. If I cannot learn about your history from your flag in an elevator speech, you've a bad flag. Use 2 to 4 colors. 1 color isn't a flag, it's a piece of construction paper. Similarly, 10 colors, unless executed with extreme finesse, ends up being little more than chaos in the wind. Never use lettering or seals. A seal or full heraldic crest is reduced to mishmash on the horizon, and the lettering is either unreadably small or so large it is ugly. What state flags are these? I can only discern Wisconsin, and that is because they wrote it in text so big it is ugly. Be distinctive or be related. These, in fact, are different flags, Romania and Chad, and while they are both great in isolation, you can't discern which country is which even 3 feet away. Here are some good flags, and here is my first flag design for Littleton. This design is meant to incorporate the South Platte River, an important founding aspect of Littleton, into a classic design for a tricolor flag. A defining color on the hoist, or flagpole side, paired with 2 other colors in large stripes to the right. This design used the window frame architecture present in the Littleton Town Hall Arts Center, with the South Platte River flowing right in the middle. Combining the L in the Littleton logo with the river and town colors proved successful. I placed the L in the canton, cradling the river surrounded by banks of red and gold, the other 2 town colors. This design uses a metaphor of moving forward, represented by a spur, popular on cowboy boots and present in the Western Welcome Week logo, combined with a train wheel, which is used in light rail, a major reason why the town is so nice and accessible.
Isaac, you're running out of time. I'm going to give you just a little bit longer, but you're at the 3 minutes.
These pieces of technology are unified by the river that started it all, the South Platte. These are the designs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isaac.
Good job, Isaac.
Isaac, I want to take a moment to tell you there is a city flag. It hasn't been, I don't think it's been shown in any public area for a number of years. For many years, it sat in a basement up in a storage area. It does have a seal on it, so it violates one of your rules. It has writing on it that probably isn't visible from your distance, and it's a purple and gold flag. It was designed with those colors to reflect the colors at Littleton High School, and then it has the city seal on it, and it has the motto of the city, which is a modern city in the Western tradition. And I'm probably the only person around who knows that flag even exists. I've asked the city manager to dig it out, and I think we have it now available.
What it looks like.
It's hanging in the police department.
It's now in the police department.
Behind closed doors.
Your ideas are very good, Isaac. Thank you very much. And maybe we can find a way to incorporate them into some of the banners we put on Main Street. Or maybe we can do it with some of the things that we do with the art for the museum. So thank you. Make sure we have your name, okay, so that we can contact you.
Thanks, Isaac. Excellent, man.
Carol Brisiak?
I'm Carol Brisiak, live in the 4th District. Mayor, would you tell us what the city motto is again?
I believe it's a modern city in a Western tradition. In the Western tradition. From about 1958, when we still had the Little Britches Rodeo and some of the other things.
Your microphone's not doing real well for you. I'm still having trouble, but I have a hard hearing.
And Carol,
Okay.
you have to follow that presentation. Good
Yeah. I'm here about the subdivision exemption. I don't know how many times I've been before you about this subject. And just to refresh your memory, what our code says about a subdivision exemption, it's a way for someone to divide a single parcel into not more than 2 individual lots. And then there's requirements that if long as the requirements are met, then there's no platting process required. And I was on the city's project activity site, and I've noticed that this subdivision exemption is still being used to combine parcels. I mentioned it at the last meeting. We have the Rocking Horse, which was combining 2 parcels. The 5445 South Broadway, it's a car dealership. They are combining 2 parcels. The Chase Bank, that's got a resubmittal pending on that one. We have 5700 South Broadway. It was actually used to divide a lot into not more than 2 parcels, so it was done correctly. We have Littleton Crossing that's now being used, or they've applied for a subdivision exemption. They want to combine lots 1 through 7. I'm really not sure or even understand what the advantage of that is, except if it is to bypass a public platting process. Littleton Village was another subdivision exemption. Sycamore Street, we had the Residence Inn at Marriott was a combination. And then the Staybridge Motel, it was another instance where they divided the lot into 2 parcels. So I would like for this council to have a discussion about how you interpret a code that's intended to divide a single lot into not more than 2, but we use it to combine lots and erase lot lines. And this has led to the Grove. And now we're looking at Littleton Crossing. And as I said, I do not understand, don't pretend to understand why it's being used. But if it's being used to circumvent a public planning process, somebody needs to blow the whistle besides the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Deanna Cook?
You?
Thank you.
Deanna Cook in District 1. Mr. Mayor and City Council, if I run out of time, I'll email this to you. I meant to do that earlier, but didn't get a chance to. Successful businesses don't stay that way by allowing employee misconduct to occur. Offending employees are often terminated. The city's concerns about prior management's conduct led to that result then, but the fix should not have stopped at that point, and that's where I think a very big ball was dropped. Once we knew zoning violations had occurred, the city had a duty to conduct an investigation to determine the extent of all misconduct and remedy it. It's clear that wasn't done, and we're still standing here in front of you asking for help to negate those impacts. Staff knew of zoning issues, concerns, and opposition to Littleton Crossing long before the developer submitted any plans or expended any funds, yet staff did not act when it would have made a difference. Now we're finding out about even more possible staff-allowed violations concerning subdivision exemptions. Staff is not correcting persistent zoning misconduct. It may be continuing to commit violations by complicity. City Council and management need to take action to stop invasive wrongful zoning conduct, something that should have been ordered and done previously. Management needs to evaluate current staff performance. We've got to get people in place that we can trust to investigate pending problems, remediate them as soon as possible, prevent future violations, and follow the law. It would be further negligence on the city's part to maintain employees who do not follow laws, whether through negligence, incompetence, or intentional conduct. The problems might extend beyond planning. Did acting managers investigate and attempt to correct what seems rampant zoning misuse when they first became aware of it? And it's concerning that they try to explain it away as unique interpretations of zoning codes when we know that's not true. Staff might wish to avoid responsibility, but I'm afraid that's where the arrow is pointing. The city attorney appears to be giving legal advice not only to staff, but to the body having authority and the power to correct offending conduct. This seems a clear conflict of interest. Surely staff attorney cannot give legal advice both to staff and to city council. Conflicts seem to abound here. Staff who decides whether to allow zoning appeals is the same people who make the decisions at issue. Getting sued by developers might end up being the least of our problems if we can't get things under control. Staff needs assessed, personnel changes may need to be made, investigation and correction needs to occur, and the time for that is now, before further harm befalls your citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pam Chadburn?
Good evening, Council. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live in District 1. Kind of a theme here. Maybe my comments relate to a project with a public hearing at Historical Preservation Board tomorrow night, but I don't want to be specific about it. What the circumstances of that suggest to me is there are actions that I would like community development to take, and they can't do that without your policy decisions. I didn't back up to the policy stuff yet, but you folks are competent to do that. So let me give you some actions that I think need to be prioritized for the good of our process and our products. First off, you folks considered tightening the B2 district zoning constraints last summer, but unfortunately you didn't end up passing it. I don't think that the analysis that you were provided, or we were provided, was adequate to make a decision. So I'd like you to take that up again. We really need to constrain B2. There's no way that a community business should have unlimited height. Maybe the most intense regional business district, but not community. So it's reasonable to expect those constraints. Secondarily, maybe it's time to examine the zoning, in this case of downtown Main Street. The Western Block is B2. The Western Block, which has the Carnegie Library, which is dear to my heart because it was my library as a child, but also because this principle of education and learning on one end of the street and justice and law on the other is precious. And I think we should highlight that and value it. So maybe we need to look at that B2 zoning. And, you know, I know there's challenges, but let's face them and deal with them. Let's not just avoid them because there's challenges. Thirdly, I'd like us to, we did away with the design review committee years ago. And that was not a good decision in hindsight because we need a very early assessment with all the stakeholders at the table, including Historical Preservation Board, of an application and how we're going to handle that. So that shouldn't go behind the scenes and then interpretations are done and decisions are made about how we handle it. Those should be made upfront with the consent of all the stakeholders, including the public. Also, please, we've got to study the parking incentive for inclusion in the Main Street Historic District. There are alternatives incentives. We need to study those, and we need to get rid of that incentive. We have blown way past it. It is hurting us more than it's helping us. Please get that study started. So those are suggestions for actions by community development. Please consider them. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Mitchell?
Tyler, can you turn on the overhead, please?
Good evening. I'm Dave Mitchell, and I come before you as chair of the Building Board of Appeals. Things have gone astray. There has not been an appeal of a staff decision for years. Years. This board is an extension of City Council and a quasi-judicial body. And yet I have been told that we could not meet without staff present. I was told that by the staff. Staff is in control of the facility and the city attorney. Difficult to have a meeting without their cooperation, but without their permission? Really? Here's the current process. A contractor or homeowner pulls a permit, does some work, and calls for an inspection. The inspector says no. The permit holder asks for a review and has a discussion with the inspector and the inspector's supervisor, city staff. They say no. Please look at the photocopy provided. The holder wants to appeal and goes to the city website, and what does he or she see? A way to contact the very staff that has turned them down. They see an appeals board. Well, good luck contacting any of them. There's absolutely no information. We have heard of the tail wagging the dog. How about the hairs wagging the tail that wags the dog? By the way, this has gotten to where it is under previous management. I doubt that current management would approve. The contact information for the board should appear first, then clearly say that the permit holder has a right to appeal, and then the staff information, if at all. I ask for a written response. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. That completes the sign-up list that I have. Is there anyone who wishes to speak that missed the opportunity to sign up? This brings us to agenda item 5. It's the consent agenda items. Consent agenda items may be adopted by a single motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion. Any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. Agenda item A is ID 17-43, a motion to change the start time of the February 27, February 28, and March 1st, 2017 City Council study session meetings for authority, board, and commission interviews. Agenda item B is a resolution authorizing the approval of the 2016 Arapahoe County Community Development Block Grant Program Subgrantee Agreement for the Littleton Sidewalk Improvements Projects.
Mr. Mayor, I respectfully request that we remove this item.
The item is pulled by Councilmember Clark. Consent agenda item C is ID 17-41. That's certification of the February 7th, 2017 regular meeting minutes.
Pull, please. Hate to disappoint Debbie.
Pulled by Councilmember Clark. Do I have a motion for agenda item A?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move we approve consent agenda item A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are we ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
This brings us back to agenda item B, which is the resolution authorizing the approval of the Arapahoe County CDBG grant. And I noticed that it says, just point of order, it says for the Littleton Sidewalk Improvements Project, but there's actually a second project on there. And I think it would be appropriate for the title to include that if that second item is going to continue to be on there. Councilmember Clark.
Yes, it appears that we have our indemnification bugaboo from, of all people, Arapahoe County, who you think would know better. So on the subgrantee agreement on page 7, they're asking us to indemnify them. And I originally had a question on whether they constituted a corporation, public or private, but I assume that they're in the same category that the Corps of Engineers is, which part of the reason why Roxborough is retaining ownership of portions of the pipe is because of the indemnification issue that the Corps of Engineers wanted. So I'm in favor of the Community Development Block Grant. I think everything else about it is excellent. I just have the problem with that section.
City Attorney, did you want to address that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Clark, I don't know if they're in the same category as the Corps of Engineers. One of the things that I looked at when I heard about your question earlier today was you correctly noted the constitutional provision that refers to a corporation or a company or a person, public or private. A county arguably is different than a municipality because a municipality is a municipal corporation. So there's an argument to be made that the prohibition against indemnification would not apply to counties. I think the better argument is that it does. And like a similar contract that we had not too long ago where council directed us to go back and take that language out, there's the preface in that sentence that says, if allowed by law or to the extent allowed by law. So in the event that a court would say we're not allowed to indemnify the county under the Colorado Constitution, there's nothing in the contract that makes us do it. So my question to the council is, do you want to go forward with the CDBG motion as it is now? Or I think it was a Comcast contract that we had a number of months ago where council's direction was, we're going to table this and go get that language out of the contract, even though it said to the extent provided by law. I don't think if the council were to approve this, it would violate the Constitution because it says to the extent provided by law, and if the Constitution doesn't allow it, we can't do it. It basically kicks the can down the road on that issue for some future date. We also, as a staff, talked about how did that get in there in the first place, and we are referred to in this document as a sub-grantee, as a recipient of these CDBG grants. There are nonprofit corporations that are also sub-grantees, and that's probably how the indemnification got in there when those monies go to nonprofit corporations. And to the extent permitted by law, probably got put in there recognizing that some sub-grantees can indemnify and some can't. So from a legal standpoint, I don't have a problem if you approve this. I don't think it poses any risk legally to the city. I've recognized in the past we've taken a different tact when we had a corporate entity that was requiring that language. So we'll do whatever council directs on this. I just don't see any legal concern of going forward.
Additional discussion?
My guess is you're exactly correct on how it got in there is an oversight on the county's part. I would think that the county would be receptive to amending the contract since they're under the same constitutional burden that we are. I can't see them fighting us on us indemnifying them when they have the same issue on doing contracts with other people. So I'm guessing it's an oversight that they won't have a problem amending. Part of the issue is this has been kicked down the road by almost everybody for so many years that nobody ever does anything. And so what we end up doing is having a constitution that we're essentially ignoring unless we happen to get into a court case and we have our weasel words, as the legal analysis called it, to get us out of something that we all know that we shouldn't be doing. So I realize it's sort of a pain, but my preference would be to contact the county, have them amended and go on.
I have one question for the city attorney that may be relevant to this. As I mentioned, the title doesn't include doctor's care, and really the ordinance is to provide funds for the sidewalk project, which is the city, and doctor's care. I am guessing doctor's care is a 501c3. That's my guess. I know it's not a governmental entity. Maybe the fact that they are ultimately a sub-grantee might have some bearing, and they are perhaps one to whom indemnification would be directed. I don't know. Phil.
Question. To what extent, possibly the acting city manager, to what extent is this time sensitive, or would a tabling of this to date certain, being March 7th, be something that would be okay?
Council, I'm not really sure. My guess is that it's probably manageable. I think we have to execute some of the work here by the end of the summer, so I think we probably have time. And I did note here that the resolution does not mention the doctor's care piece in there, so if we do table this, we can probably amend the resolution as well.
With that answer, I'd like to make a motion that we table this to our next public meeting that is not a work session, and that would be March 7th, being a date certain. And in that time frame, resolve the legal research as well as titling.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, and it is to table it to a date certain, March 7th, allowing for legal research and a title change. Is there any additional discussion? Are we prepared to vote on the tabling? Ready to vote?
Yep.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Agenda item C, consent agenda, item C, is ID 17-41. That's the certification of the February 7th, 2017 regular meeting minutes pulled by Councilmember Clark.
Move to approve based on the city clerk's certification, the February 7, 2017 videos, the minutes for the February 7, 2017 regular meeting of the City Council.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there additional discussion? Ready to vote?
The vote is 6 in favor, with Councilmember Clark voting no. The motion carries 6-1.
This brings us to agenda item 6, which are ordinances for second reading and public hearing. There are 2 ordinances before us. Each of them will require a separate public hearing. Agenda item A, 6A, is an ordinance 02-2017. It's an ordinance on second reading, amending section 132 of the City Code to add a new definition for minutes. Look at the sign-ups, and I believe City Clerk Hefner will present that also, if we have any staff questions. Thank you. Okay, thanks. Do we have any questions for the City Clerk? We have talked about this at a study session. Not seeing any questions at this time. I would like to open the public hearing at 7:02. I have one person who signed up to speak on it, and that is Carol Brezak.
Carol Brezak, 4th District. I'm here to ask you to expand your definition of minutes to something more than just action minutes. There are a few reasons that come to mind. Continuity. It's important to maintain the records of our council meetings in a similar fashion to what we've done since Littleton Incorporated in 1959. They're informative and provide the background information on a particular subject if a citizen desires to do the research. They are also helpful to the current council in understanding the actions of previous councils. Action minutes would not provide the needed background to help you understand actions from the years past. A public record. Minutes of meetings are excellent records for anyone researching incumbent seeking an additional term. Just to see how the councilman voted doesn't tell the whole story, but reading an explanation of the councilman's reasoning for their vote is valuable. The purpose of minutes is to provide documentation for both attendees and non-attendees about what was discussed and what was voted on, and I emphasize the word discussed. Action minutes do not provide the rationale of you, our elected officials. You have proposed to include the name and stance of citizens that address the council, but what is just as important, if not even more important, is your stance on each agenda item. I'm not suggesting a word for word, but your stance on an issue that you vote upon is important. To make my point, I would like to use the joint sewer meeting that happened in October between Littleton and Englewood. A few meetings ago, Ms. Brinkman asked for written minutes of that meeting because her memory was fading. I've been looking for the written minutes myself. I now know that they're not available. They're in the form of an audio recording. So each of you, if you want to know what was discussed and determined at that meeting, will need to listen to the audio, just as I will. If action minutes were to be provided from that meeting, what action would be recorded? It wasn't a meeting where you took action. It was just a meeting that you attended. Since there was no action taken, minutes would be useless in helping those in attendance to know what took place, what expectations, if any, and for whom. But if a real attempt was made to document the meeting in minutes, we would all think of when we hear the word, which is minutes, written, it would be easy and fairly quick to review what took place in that meeting. Please amend your motion to at a minimum include your stance on the agenda items that you have stated a position. As I was researching minutes online, I ran across a statement that makes a lot of sense to me. quote, "Without full meeting minutes, the meeting's prospects for success are diminished." Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else signed up for this public hearing. With that, I'll close the public hearing at 7:05. In order to continue, I'd like to get a motion, if I could, and then we can discuss it after a motion in a second.
It's only appropriate that I make the motion.
Okay.
I move to approve an ordinance on second reading which amends section 132 of the city code to add a new definition for minutes.
Second.
With a motion and a second, discussion.
Yes, I would like to offer an amendment, please, to my own motion. If you all will look on the ordinance itself, lines 29 through 31.
Numbers again?
29 through 31.
Thank you.
The intent of the motion is to modify those 3 lines so it just contains the first part of the second sentence. So officially the motion is lines 29 through 31 be replaced with a sentence that says the video recordings of minutes shall be kept in perpetuity.
And question for clarification, you're looking for 29, 30, and 31 basically compressed to that one sentence?
Yes, sir.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can you stand by one while I get my computer to work?
And who seconded the main motion? I'm sorry.
Jerry.
Jerry,
Councilmember
that's right.
Valdez.
How long ago?
I'm not going to be able to get that up.
We try and do.
I could look at yours. Just so I can get that correctly again, Doug, could you say you're going to replace the 29 to 31?
With the sentence that says, the video recordings of the meetings shall be kept in perpetuity, which is basically the first part of the second sentence.
Additional discussion? Bill?
The idea behind to provide clarification is in case somewhere down the road something's found in the, let's say the action minutes or whatever we term them at this point, are approved, and there's subsequent question about it, and you go back to examine that, much in the way that Ms. Breezak talked about in the public comment on this matter, that we should be able to correct the minutes at that time. We've had examples of that on numerous occasions here in the chambers, and in fact, Mr. Clark, in the study session on the 13th of December when we discussed this, you said, I think, that if there's a discrepancy that shows up between the written minutes and the video, no matter what the time frame is, the written minutes should be amended to reflect what happened in the video, because no one is served by having minutes that don't reflect what happened. So we need to have the capacity to make corrections should that circumstance occur. Nobody wants to have things that are incorrect, so that by eliminating to provide clarification, you foreclose council's ability to take the correct action. And we've seen that in many, many cases where we'd like to go back and change something that happened in the past, but we need to have the ability to do so. By leaving to provide clarification phrase in there, we have that ability. We're not hamstringing ourselves.
Additional comments? Phil?
I've actually thought about this one and that particular issue that Councilmember Hopping made. I think by having the video minutes retained, and the phrase is in perpetuity, will allow for that review. And I don't think we have to, and I kind of find it extra, there that we have to say, if you want to correct things, you have the opportunity to do that. That may be something that a council would undertake at some point in time, but that record is there. It's also what I know in a number of other instances, regardless of what the minutes say, the video minutes are what, or the video recordings are what often attorneys will refer to if there is any litigation or potential for litigation going on. So I think by retaining the recordings, we have minutes that reflect the actions that were taken, and with the video recordings, if someone wants the context that's there, I continue to look for enhancements on the technology around video recordings so that they can be searched and dealt with. And I've been quite pleased in some of the work that I've done myself to be able to find it via the indexing that already occurs. And I believe that technology will only improve over time. So I'm satisfied. I respect your thoughts, Councilman Hopping, but I think this gives us every tool that we need.
Any additional discussion?
So would we restate the motion, the amendment?
The amendment will be to remove lines 29, 30, and 31 and replaced by a single sentence, which in essence is the beginning of one of those that we have removed, that says the video recording shall be kept in perpetuity.
Thank you.
Ready to vote on the, okay, this will be a vote on the amendment by Councilmember Clark that I just read to remove 29, 30, and 31 and replace them with the line that is in essence the beginning of one of those sentences. The video recording shall be kept in perpetuity. This amends the main motion. Ready?
The vote is 5 in favor with Councilmember Brinkman and Councilmember Hopping voting no. The motion carries 5-2.
So this brings us back to now that corrected language in the ordinance. We have a motion and a second on that main ordinance. Is there any further discussion on the motion now as it stands? Yes.
Yeah, I would like to amend, I'm not quite sure where to put it, that the minutes shall include the issues that were discussed for agenda items. And maybe you all can help with this, and then maybe I'll get a second. What I'm trying to get at is to know the kinds of issues that were raised when we discuss something before we actually vote. What I discovered going back, doing research on a couple of issues recently, when I went back to try to figure out what the devil happened at a particular meeting, it was really easy when I found the minutes for going way back, when I found the minutes to see what issues were raised, critical issues that were raised relevant to a main motion with a proposed amendment. Whether the amendment passed or not, it was good to know what issues were raised. And I don't particularly look forward to looking at maybe an hour-long public hearing, which sometimes we've had on something, to really understand all the issues that were raised on some really important council motion.
I took some notes. Would you like me to read what I think your motion says? Or would you like just additional discussion?
Can I comment on that before you actually make the motion?
Okay.
What we're approving is an ordinance that basically just says that we're going to have written minutes instead of video minutes. I think that there's an understanding which is delineated in the council communication of the general format of those minutes. And what we get or I think what we're thinking we're going to get is for each person that speaks, their name and a sentence or so summary of what they say. Am I understanding that correctly?
So those are not action minutes. Those are summary minutes.
Okay.
So if you want summary minutes, then we need to change the ordinance. If you want action minutes, you're already getting action minutes in your packets now, which is, I add that when you do the certification of the minutes.
So you're saying that line 25,
Right, those are they're action minutes is what's in
and
there.
26.
That's what we discussed when we were at the study session. Council all agreed that action minutes were the way we wanted to go.
Indeed. So clarify, so a citizen's stance on something, it would be like support or oppose. It wouldn't be, I support it because, or I oppose it because, right? Yeah, and what I'm trying to capture is the because piece.
If we're going to add the because piece, then we need to make them summary minutes.
These are terms of art in how you keep minutes. Whether if you add the because piece, whether it be for citizens or for council members who are explaining why they're voting for or against something, we're not talking about action minutes.
Right.
We're talking about summary minutes.
That's why I made my amendment.
Yeah, that whole paragraph would need to be changed. And I wasn't at the study session, but I will tell you, I know in my experience in other communities that have decided what kind of minutes to keep, it's a pretty significant time commitment on the city clerk to prepare summary minutes. So it sounds like Councilmember Cole's request is to do something different than the staff was directed to do in a prior council meeting as far as bringing this ordinance forward. That's certainly not to say you can't revisit the issue. I just think staff is a little bit confused, having gotten direction from council previously as to what to bring back to you, that now the issue is something different.
Jerry.
I think the minutes as proposed here, I think it is a good thing. If we start putting too many details in it, then I agree it is a very time-consuming thing, and that's part of the reason we went to the video minutes. When I've done my search, I look for the topics, and that's not that difficult to find. And then you go back and you just watch the meeting. You can watch a portion of the debate or all of the debate, but it gives you, at least leads you to where you need to go. If we're just counting on the written to be what Ms. Brezak comes up and says every time, or a time, really to find out what she meant, you need to hear and see what she said or presents. Because if we're just counting on the minutes to really give us what her detailed point may be, or any citizen's point may be, the minutes will become a book or a chapter just on one particular subject.
So in my thinking, this is not, so maybe I haven't phrased it right. This is not great detail about what each person said. It would be including, for example, citizens testified and issues were raised about the setback from the property line or the height of the building or whatever. It would just summarize those various things. And you're not hearing me, sorry. And if I don't think people should have to watch a whole meeting to pick up on all of that. And one of the reasons that this popped into my head is because of the big to-do we're having with the project downtown Littleton. And I happened to be able to get the minutes for when that project was approved way back, that now is finally coming into the second phase. And it was very helpful to see the issues that were raised in those minutes. And I know it takes more time to do that, but if I hadn't been able to see that, read that, it would have required watching probably a fairly long meeting to get the feel for the various issues that were raised.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think if the majority of council is interested in summary minutes, then what I would suggest is that let staff specifically go back and understand kind of the impact to the clerk's office, because this is different than what we discussed at the study session. And quite honestly, I do not know the impact of what that would be. And then we could bring that information back to you, and then you can make a decision about how you might want to proceed.
I'd also like to add that it takes 15 minutes. I mean, for 15 minutes of video or audio, it takes 1 hour to summarize those minutes for every 15 minutes.
So that we're not going back, I'd like to call the question.
Thank you.
Question's been called.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Did you get a second on your motion? Because I didn't
She did
hear a
not.
second.
She didn't actually
we never
make
had
the
a-
motion. I interrupted her making the motion.
Okay. I
So,
got it as a motion.
So we have no motion and no second
Okay.
officially.
but I feel bad because I prevented her from making the motion, and then this is transformed into a call for questions. So,
Are you going to
So I thought I was saying that
Doesn't it take a majority of council now to change the call for question?
Well, there is no question, technically.
He called the question.
The main motion, okay, I'm sorry.
What we have right now is a main motion.
Yes.
And we still are open for discussion on the main motion.
No, once,
But the question's
if you call the question, there
been
is
called.
So we're ready to vote.
Call for a vote,
Ready to vote.
so this is the question on the main motion, right?
yes.
as amended.
What?
This will be on the main motion as amended by Councilmember Clark, which was the change in lines 29 through 31. And that was the approved amendment change. So now we have that, and now we have the original resolution with that amendment. Ready?
The vote is 5 in favor with Councilmember Cole and Councilmember Hopping voting no. The motion carries 5-2.
If I can pontificate for a second. I feel bad that Peggy didn't get a chance to make her motion, get a second, and then just have a vote on it. However, I think probably the best course of action is to go forward with this as action minutes, see how that works for a while, and if we discover that that's unworkable with the video and the ability to link that up to the minutes. And I know from experience, having done it myself, it's extremely time-consuming to try and summarize, and actually it's the summarization that ends up causing debate, at least in my experience in the past, on minutes, because when you summarize, you necessarily distill it down into a meeting and people debate over the meeting. So I understand Peggy's motivation. I understand Carol's argument for that. Having gone back and gone through every single meeting of LIFT that there were minutes for, it simply wouldn't have been possible. There wasn't enough time in the world probably to listen to that as video. And so having the written minutes, I can see the value of it. But given our technology and the amount of time, my personal feeling is this is a good way of going forward. If we find that this is unacceptable in the future, we can come back and do it again. So I'm sorry that I messed up your ability to get a motion made, and I apologize for that.
I concur.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just
Yes.
adding to that, I think that's an excellent suggestion. In fact, we can flag that as staff and say in 6 months, come back and just check in with council if they so point.
Yeah, and I think some citizens have made some really good points about their need to have what they are looking for in the minutes. We've progressed to this point. We could go a little further if we had to, if it proved necessary, but I think we're finally getting back to those action minutes that we've looked at for a while. So this brings us to item B. This is also a public hearing, and it's an ordinance on second reading. It's ordinance 03-2017. It's an ordinance on second reading approving an interceptor transfer agreement between the city and the Roxborough Water and Sanitation District regarding ownership of a gravity interceptor sewer, terminating easements to Roxborough Water and Sanitation District, and granting an access easement to Roxborough Water and Sanitation District, presented by Mr. Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. We had just a short presentation here kind of summarizing this. And again, this is specifically asking if the Council supports accepting the ownership of the Roxborough Gravity Interceptor Sewer, terminating several easements, and then granting an access easement back to the Roxborough Water and Sand District. So we had a first reading on January 17th. There was a study session on February 14th where we discussed this issue. And now here this evening, we just have the second reading and public hearing. So the City of Littleton, Roxborough, Platte Canyon are the parties involved. You've seen this graphic before, both in the original first hearing or first reading, and then again here last week. This shows you kind of the ownership of the interceptor, and this area circled in red would be the City of Littleton's ownership. You had some background presented at the meeting here last week. This gravity line was connected to the shared line in 2005, and through an agreement here, there were several improvements that were made, and with the intent that the ownership would be transferring here to the City of Littleton. We summarized before the problems that we had with the Army Corps of Engineers, and specifically the indemnification issue, and so there was a section that was now being retained here by Roxborough that was different than anticipated here back in 2006. So there's no cost to the city for the transfer. This allows for future connections to the system without other parties. We see this as kind of standard long-term maintenance costs. The management of any sewer odors specifically will be now the city's. Of course, Roxborough will take care of the upstream section. City collects the sewer charges to cover maintenance and operations. That's a short presentation. We do have representatives from the Roxborough here in case there's some additional questions that council may have.
Can you go back to the map and show where that Army Corps section is?
Actually, I think I have a better slide. Let me see if I can pull that up.
Yeah, this is where the two oblongs meet.
In the very bottom of this, this graphic is probably the best way to see that. And if you can barely make out C470 there, you can see kind of a portion that's to the left and the bottom. That's the piece that would be retained by Roxborough that's part of the Army Corps piece.
How long is that? A couple miles?
5,000 to 6,000 feet.
You have to come down so we can hear.
Yeah.
Or Mike.
Sounds like 5,000 to 6,000 feet, but we'll let the district manager for Roxborough respond to that. Larry?
Council, Larry Moore, General Manager, Roxborough Water and Sanitation District. I don't know exactly how many feet, but virtually our transition vault, where it goes from force main to gravity, sits right at Platte Canyon, where the exit off of 470. And the line runs east all the way towards the park, and then it makes a hard left where it follows the trail. And so that's there's 13 manholes, and generally those are about 500 feet apart. So you know it's several thousand feet, and you know, of course those are the manholes. They're probably the most concern as far as deterioration. We've lined those manholes to get them extra life, and of course we're retaining ownership of those.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions of Mark? Phil?
Not of Larry, of Mark. Mark, you didn't, or what is not included in the staff analysis is there is a section on the north part where maintenance costs at least can be shared. They may not have been shared in the past, but among three entities, and that is retained going forward. Although the city will have the maintenance responsibility, those costs can be shared between Platte Canyon, Roxborough, and the city.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I think my question is just actually more detailed of Phil's, but I want to make sure that I understand this correctly. In the agreement, the interceptor transfer agreement, it says in section 6 that the city shall perform all routine and emergency maintenance on the shared pipe as further provided in and accordance with paragraph 9 of the cost-sharing IGA. In paragraph 9, are you with me so far?
I'm with you so far.
Okay, so paragraph 9 of what I think is the cost-sharing IGA refers us back to paragraph 5.4, which has that ratio of the division of the cost between the city, Roxborough, and Platte Canyon related to the percentage of flow through there. So is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly? So, and my concern is if the earth were to happen to open up and swallow the pipe, it's obviously going to be an emergency basis because otherwise everybody has to stop flushing their toilets. And the way I read this is in that case, the city's responsible for fixing the pipe, but then they come back and allocate the costs, dividing by the ratio that's in here to the three parties.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have additional questions? And we can ask some more questions after we get the motion in the second, after the public hearing too. So,
I'll move to approve on second reading the ordinance authorizing the interceptor transfer agreement between the City of Littleton and Roxborough Water and Sanitation District, terminating 2 easements by the City of Littleton in South Platte Park and north of West Bowles Avenue, and granting an easement to Roxborough Water and Sanitation District by the City of Littleton.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. We have a public hearing on this. I did not have anybody who signed up. Is there anybody who wants to try to tackle this one? We had a long study session and a previous first reading, so we've been talking about it for a long time, and it's not an easy one. Opening the public hearing and closing the public hearing a few seconds later at 7:33. So how's this, any additional discussion or comments by staff or by the council? Phil.
Just one quick one is what is included in the staff analysis that I think is very important, at least as far as my support, is the staff analysis has looked at the engineering as well as the material used along this segment and has indicated no additional staff as well as staff required as well as any significant maintenance would be years in the future, and want to make sure that that's out there for folks to understand that there's no anticipated anywhere near-term costs with regard taking on this responsibility.
That is correct.
And then the second part to this is taking this on is actually something that was contractually set earlier, so we're fulfilling one of those agreements that is the natural flow of the original agreements.
That is also correct.
No pun intended.
Any additional discussion? Are we ready to vote? We have a motion and a second.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it. This brings us to agenda item 7, which is general business. We have one item, item A, which is ID 17-46, a motion confirming a hiring range for the city attorney recruitment.
Mr.
Would you like
Mayor.
to present that?
That's going to fall to me here this evening here. So you have in your council packet a staff report here from Eric Savage, our HR director, who's making a recommendation here what the range would be here for our city attorney. We used the information from Mountain States Employers Council. We have looked at the public sector attorneys. We also have looked at increasing the data here to reflect a 2017 wage using the Employment Cost Index. And so that range for 2017 would be a minimum of $142,200 with a maximum of $184,800. And with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Do we have questions?
When Eric had requested information from council as to which range we preferred, so was the majority then to go for 2017?
Councilmember, that's my understanding, is that the majority seemed to be comfortable with that. I think, I don't have the notes from that, from his conversations there with you, but my understanding, this is what the majority was looking at.
Thank you.
Additional comments or questions?
I think it's, I think we have to advertise a range. Nobody in their right mind is going to apply for a job that they have no idea what the range is. I think this is a reasonable range, sort of a shocking range, but a reasonable range. And I think that as we interview candidates, we need to assess their qualifications and experience for how they fit into the range. But I think the range is appropriate.
Yeah, I actually think that including a range in this recruitment process is important. We are greatly challenged in both the recruitment of a city manager and of a city attorney. And I think that Littleton has always been very conservative in terms of their pay rates throughout. The entire time I've been on council, we've been incredibly conservative in terms of what we pay our direct reports. And I think it's fiduciarily responsible of us. But I also think that we are seeing, and Mark, you've referred to it a number of times with hiring a city engineer, that the marketplace is quickly changing, and the marketplace is setting higher ranges than we are truly comfortable with. But in order to remain competitive and in order to be able to recruit the level and the caliber of employee that we should have, I think we need to be a little bit more aggressive than we may have been in the past. This is a fair range, and it gives council a $40,000-ish area to kind of play around with. So I support this.
Any additional comments? Can I get a motion in a second?
Move to approve the recommended hiring range for the city attorney recruitment.
Second.
With a motion and a second, any additional discussion? Ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
This brings us to agenda item 8, which is comments and reports. Mr. Ralph, the interim city manager.
Mr. Mayor, just pass on a couple of comments. Dave Flagg, our Public Works Grounds Maintenance Manager here, shared a couple of interesting facts with me here today. Council probably aware we started our tree program here a couple of weeks ago, and we've already sold over 40% of those trees. So we still have 17 species still available. Obviously, just in the last 2 weeks to sell that many is quite an accomplishment. I'm also noting is that our community gardens at this point in time are 90% full in both sites, with just a couple of plots left, and that's quite exceptional as well. So I think 2017, at least from those two programs, are off to a great start. So that's all my report for this week.
Let's hope for a successful harvest.
So council reports, let's start on the other side of the dais with Councilmember Hopping.
Thanks, sir. I've always thought our basic job is to make Littleton a little bit better tomorrow than it is today. And As an historic preservation person, it kind of hurt this week to see a little historic house between what was Jaja Bistro and the Green Hotel on Nevada Street torn down yesterday morning. It just disappeared. It was kind of weird. It was President's Day. No city offices are open. The bulldozer showed up at, I looked out my window at about 9 o'clock in the morning. They were taking it apart. And by 6:45 at night, they were digging the foundation. It's leveled today. They were just clearing it. Right or wrong for that house to go. Not every house has to be saved, but we need a plan. And I've talked about this before. We need to figure out what we want out of our downtown, what we want out of the city. Ms. Chadbourne talked about height restrictions in the B2 zone. I've always thought it was just in a common sense way wrong to have two different zonings on Main Street, because that is our core. It looks seamless to us, and we need to address that. It can be done through design overlays and such. I've asked for that before, but it's a shame to see that kind of thing happen. On a happier note, I have booze. This is from Rocker Spirits, where some staff and Councilwoman Brinkman and I went tonight. It's over on Hill Street. Rocker is awesome. If you haven't been in there, the building has been there for a long time. It kind of passes for it's a high-end lounge and distillery. The decor in there is kind of a rural industrial, but they have cool things like tin siding from the Leavenworth State Prison. I hope nobody here would recognize it offhand, but they also have the bar.
Only from tours.
Only from tours. The bar is really neat. It's made from the bed inside of a semi-trailer. They've, in the January 7th of last month's Food and Wine magazine, they won an award for one of the top 6 distilleries in the U.S. That's right here in downtown Littleton. It's really cool. They won an international packaging award for their bottle that is self-writing, theoretically. That was planned, but it's supposed to self-write. I have trouble getting it to do it. It works better when it's...
that's because we're tilted.
We're tilted, but at any rate, that's the way the bottle is designed. All right here in Littleton, this is designed after an oil can. And right now, anything you could buy there, it's vodka, whiskey, and rum, but they get it from other places that are similar to the way they will distill this. They're distilling it now. They should have it available soon, except for the whiskeys, which have to age 3 years. So just a great new spot in downtown Littleton. So stop in and try it out. It's one of the many places we have.
Thank you. Councilmember Cernanek.
Yes, the young lady that did our spin class earlier this week had a trivia question as to what are the ingredients to rum, and she said proper rum is aged 12 years. So
proper.
Yes, with that. At the DRCOG board meeting, that's the Denver Regional Council of Government last week, it was shared the calendar for the next transportation improvement grant process. That calendar has been shared with staff, as well as a proposal regarding not just regional allocations, which come to the board, but then a process that would be modified that would include sub-regional allocations, and that has been reviewed by staff, and we've taken the next step in having the Technical Advisory Committee continue to process that as far as the board is concerned. And also there was a presentation around macroeconomic forecast for the region, which is interesting. The presentation is available on the DRCOG website. And it is from the macro forecast that any municipality or even sub to a municipality analysis are created in taking a look at transportation, congestion, impact of development, and so make note on that. On Friday last week was the monthly meeting of the Advisory Committee on Aging for the region. Significant discussion was on attainable housing for seniors, and the group significantly discussed what is Senate Bill 156, which has some proposed comprehensive adjustments to construction litigation, including prior notices, and there's also another bill going through having the right to remedy that is out there as well. And so you can pay some attention to that. And then I have an interest in, I think council would, in at least taking a look at the code review and zonings and zoning review and seeing what kind of schedule that is and whether it's going to be pieced before us. And I don't know if the city, acting city manager would want to comment on that.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Thank you.
Let's let the city manager comment on that. Well,
We've had some discussion even since I've been back. Council's aware that I've been gone here out of town for about a week and a half. So we are ready to present here to council kind of a schedule for that and how we might approach that work. If you remember here last fall when the council approved the budget, there was a piece in there for updating our code in a comprehensive manner. You did ask that we come back to you with a particular schedule. So we were willing to, here in the near term to come back and share that with you.
Thank you. Well, one, it was great seeing Isaac's presentation tonight about a flag, and I would like to see that Littleton flag pulled out. It sounds like we have several design flaws to which Isaac had mentioned or called out as not favorable, and it would be kind of cool to see that flag and maybe to involve Isaac. That was pretty cool to see him up here doing that. Such a great presentation. The other thing, Dave Mitchell, a member of the Board of Appeals, had brought up some information too. Maybe if we could ask him to follow up on that as well. And my third item would be for the Littleton, Nevada Place to St. Mary's property. If I know, I think our city attorney or staff has been working with some folks there, and if we can get an update at some time, not necessarily now, but maybe at sometime soon. Thank you.
thank you. Let's go to Councilmember Clark or Councilmember Cole.
Yeah, you want to speak for me?
No, I've done enough damage. Cut her off. Sorry.
I don't have anything tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark.
A couple weeks ago, I asked about subdivision exemptions, and then I immediately went on vacation, and Mark immediately went on vacation, and so there hasn't been time to do anything, and I realize that. I am concerned with our current interpretation on subdivision exemptions for a couple of reasons. One is I don't think that the current interpretation is any way supported by the actual English language of the section, but the other concern is the net effect of the interpretation that we're currently using is it completely obviates the Planning Commission and the platting process for combining properties, because the interpretation that was put forth for the Grove process basically says that the numbers in there where it says that a subdivision exemption is to divide a property into not more than two, what the explanation given for the Grove is that those numbers only applied for subdividing, but they don't apply for combining. And in fact, we've had subdivision exemptions used to combine 2 properties, 3 properties, 7 properties. So the logical result of what in my view is that distorted interpretation of the language is we basically shut the public out and the Planning Commission out of the platting process for combining. And we have a very well-defined platting process for minor plats and major plats, and the division is 10 lots. And yet we now, with this interesting, I'll put it, interpretation of subdivision exemptions, basically have wiped that completely off. Who is going to go through a platting process when they can go through a subdivision exemption process with our interesting interpretation and completely bypass public hearings and the Planning Commission? And Littleton is a city that may be different from other cities. It's probably different than Frisco and a number of other cities, but one of the differences in Littleton is we have a lot of citizens that are involved in the process in a lot of places, and we have designed and modified our code over the years to take that into account and to fix issues that have come up during public hearing processes. And I can go back and probably point to 2 or 3 portions of the code over the last 25 years that have been inserted to correct issues that have come up during the public hearing process. I think the citizens value their ability to be included. I think it's important that they be included, and my opinion is not only is the interpretation not supported by the language, but the end result is something that we don't want to have happen, and that is excluding the public from a public hearing that should be in front of the Planning Commission and excluding the Planning Commission. And frankly, that's part of their job, is to look at plats and make an assessment of plats, and then to recommend that or move that forward. So, having said all that, I know you were on vacation, I was on vacation. I'm sure that something will come back to us in a reasonable period of time in the future, given the fact that we're both gone for 2 weeks.
Well, wait a minute. So clarify what's something you want to come back. You want to amend that code to make it clear, or you're expecting a tidal wave, or I'm teasing you?
No, I don't. Frankly, I don't think the code needs to be amended to make it clear. I think it's pretty clear right now. I just am expecting, the attorney that made that opinion is no longer with the city. However, the staff wants to, whatever method the staff wants to use to go back and examine once again how they've interpreted the code is up to the staff. But I guess what I'm expecting is that the staff go back and re-examine how they've interpreted the application of that code and come back to us with either with a result, with what their conclusion is. And then we can go forward from there.
I think the city manager interim city manager would like to respond.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I may. That is our intent. So when I talked earlier here, let me add a little clarification or detail. When staff comes back and shares with you our plan, we do have a series of priorities that we do believe need to be kind of handled sooner rather than later. Subdivision exemption process is one of those. We've used that historically for many different purposes. And if you remember, the first time I personally ran across that was when we had to move a property line here relative to the fire station. We used that same process. So it's been used in many different fashions. And so staff is prepared here to address that here with council in the very near term.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yep, I have 3 things. First is I wanted to read something to the council and make sure that this is the intention of the council. The Greenway Foundation is looking to do a press release regarding the environmental pool fundraising efforts. And there will be a portion in that press release that the South Platte Working Group is submitting. And so it's been submitted to me to bless it. And I just, quick paragraph, if I could just read it and make sure that it's council's intention. The South Platte Working Group, PRIN, a collaborative working group of the jurisdictions and districts along the South Platte River in Arapahoe County, as well as regional, state, and federal agencies and other organizations in PRIN, has discussed raising the funds to purchase 50 acre-feet of storage for the environmental pool. While the discussions are still preliminary for the working group, the Littleton City Council has already agreed to contribute funding towards 10 acre-feet. The working group will be seeking to secure funding commitments over the next few months to help meet the target. Background on that won't be in the press release is that Arapahoe County and the other jurisdictions are continuing their discussions amongst themselves about their contributions. There's full intention to contribute, though. So they want to get a press release out. I think the intention is to show that there is forward motion and momentum on this project. And I think it kind of shows a good foot forward for Littleton City Council that we're the first ones to put in out of the group. So if everybody's okay with that.
In the 10 acre-feet, was that dollar amount of whatever it was?
Yeah, Mike brought and did the math, so we can, he gave the group the update and had agreed to purchase the 10 acre-feet. I will double check that with Mike and make sure that we have that. We may not need to mention a exact amount, which gets us too close to $1, because I think that dollar amount's fluid. Number two.
Of course it is.
Oh, there we go. Number two point, and it's to Councilmember Hopping's talk about the rocker spirits. And that was, if you get an opportunity to, and they love to show you their place. It's really fascinating. It's a small group. It's four men and a woman who, it's a combination of a gentleman who does the distilling and understands that, a gentleman who's a bartender and understands mixology, the owner who is has always done a little bit of everything and is passionate about this, and his passion is just exuberance. And we're seeing this trend more and more, and I think it's something council should keep in the back of their mind, is that they did not go and try to put in a commercial kitchen. So they have hired, and they have a semi-permanent food truck out in front, which will be doing wood-fired pizzas. And they have a chef who's worked in New York for a number of Michelin star restaurants. So this is the new fine dining. And it's really fascinating, and it's one of those places that you walk into and you think, gosh, am I still in Littleton? Because it's so different. But I also wanted to make a comment that back in 2013, we had a number of businesses came to council, and we had a distillery, we had a winery, and we had a craft brewer, and for some reason there was some simpatico at the time, and they were all three coming down, not even knowing that the other was coming, and asking us to please change some use allowances in the downtown area because they wanted to bring these types of businesses in. And we did. And so this is, we have there's a winery over by the Three Chimneys, and I'm not sure that they're actually making wine. There they are, okay. And we've got now our distillery, and Ernie actually used their location as a kind of a core of what the criteria would be in terms of distillery use, the wall sizes, the restaurant, this type of thing. So it all comes around. So 4 years later, we're starting to see some fulfillment on things. So if council will indulge me, and it's interesting this evening because we've had a couple of citizens came down and spoke to what I've been wanting to speak to. And council members have made a couple of comments this evening regarding same thing. Regret not being at the meeting 2 weeks ago, but still, I guess, have a little bit of this, and it likes to hang on. So, but was unable to be here. I was watching from home, though. Y'all look great on TV.
Way over here.
Yeah, I'm not allergic anymore, or contaminated anymore, but anyway. One of the things that's been kind of in the back of my mind for a long time, and I've brought it up at a number of study sessions, and I think over a period of time, we've all brought it up in points, and again this evening we have. I put my thoughts down in a written format, and so I normally like to talk off the cuff, which is why I appreciate videos. I'd like to follow my writing as much as I can because I don't want to miss any of these points. This is important, and I'm really trying to, I'm hoping that we are going to be able to make some forward motion on some of these projects. As we continue to reference the council goals and priorities, we last discussed those on the 24th of April, and I do appreciate the acting city manager for bringing these back to council. But perhaps, and they were brought back in the form of also looking at study session topics. But perhaps there needs to be a few other decisions made by council before we start to have a discussion of these priorities and study session topics. There's been a lot of talk about we really don't want to dive deep into some of these more difficult topics until we see some sort of stabilization within the city. We had a rocky time for a while there, and I think that there's a feeling that the stabilization is starting to be established. We had a little bit of a misstart with city manager hiring, and no, yes, we went through the long process. No, we didn't find anyone. Yes, we're reposting. It could be upwards of June before we have someone on board, and then it could be another 3 months or so before that person is really acclimated into a situation where they're feeling more comfortable. So we've got some time ahead of us. There's some highway to cover before we have that established. And we have projects that are sitting in queue that have been sitting there because of the concerns about the stabilization and of concerns about the city manager, and kind of been just in waiting. And I am suggesting that we get these things off the shelf and we start making some decisions about these things, and we do it sooner than later. I don't think there is a perfect time to bring these to council. Waiting for a new city manager is not we don't even know if we'll find one this round either, so let's not count on that. And then then we're bumping up to the council election. We have 4 council member seats that are up for re-election, so that's another shift and change. So if the intention is to wait through all of that, then I think the council needs to make that very clear, that we intend to put these things on a hold until we get through that. If there needs to be a majority decision by this council so that the direction is clear to staff and the community and those interested in moving to and or doing business in Littleton about what our intentions are, then we need to make that decision, and it needs to be clear. The stamp for the mineral station, in my opinion, needs to be brought forward. It's sitting on a shelf, getting dusty. It was last seen at a contentious community outreach meeting held by the consultant, and since then, there have been conversations between staff and residents of the community who dislike it, but it has yet to be presented in a public meeting to the elected representatives of the city. What happens to the stamp lies in the hands of the city council, and we need a public meeting on this, and the council needs to see this, and there needs to be discussion. That is a project that was funded. We were given grant money to do that, and it's a phase 1 of a stationary master plan for our downtown station also. Other projects that are collecting dust include the stamp for the downtown station. Councilmember Clark referred to the subdivision exemption discussion. We had a presentation and a study session months ago about that, and it's kind of gone away. Overall code revisions, I think Councilmember Cernanek brought that up, and we just keep talking about it. I've talked to members on the planning board who have actually been working on them and feel like they are ready for councils to start to see some of these things. Capital improvement and infrastructure master plan, we're talking about it all the time, but we need to actually start seeing this stuff so we can start making decisions. And if we're not going to make decisions, that's a decision too. We need a discussion about revenue sources, and Councilmember Hoppings brought this up repeatedly. And a year ago, we talked about the opportunities that we may need to be looking at in terms of revenue sources because of the imminence of the crossing of our incomes and our expenses, and when those lines cross, what that means. And we're looking at that in 3 years. And an incentive policy for businesses who want to redevelop and an incentive policy for new development are priorities for us because those are the things that we don't have that are preventing decisions from being made. And that's just to name a few. I'm sure that there are more. Some of these items were also tied to budget commitments, so it's even more important now we keep some of these on the forefront. The bottom line for me is that council has spent a great deal of time going backwards and undoing a number of decisions made previously. If it is our intention to continue the path of undoing and not doing, then I would like to have a clear voice from council on the record publicly declaring that intention. However, if there is support to have these long-awaited plans and conversations regarding the future of the community, then I would like to have that discussion and to have council give clear direction to staff. Waiting for a new city manager and or a new council is not doing our job. It takes courage to make some of these decisions, and it will take time to educate ourselves and discuss the options. We need to at least begin this process and support a timeline that will keep these important issues on track towards completion. Dealing with zoning issues like B2, which the Grove was affected, Nevada 1 and 2 being rezoned, though under 4 acres, and at least a dozen other parcels within the city rezoned while being undersized. Issues with facades, parking, traffic, mobility, and commerce continue to be among the most volatile in our city. Yet we are not prioritizing our efforts towards visioning, planning, designing, and preparing this community for the future. We spend a lot of time reacting because we have not spent the necessary effort in proactive planning and decision-making. Does anyone even dare want to add up the staff hours, the council hours, or the attorney fees of what Littleton Crossing or the Grove has cost this community? How many more of these will we deal with, and how many more will we leave for other councils? It seems we continue to be very clear about what we don't want here, but there's no balance to that message. We also need to be equally clear about what we do want. We need to clearly communicate. And this becomes so important when developers enter our community. Without a clear direction for Littleton and defined detail of what this community wants and needs, we will continue to only get what the developer wants to do. Large parcels of property will continue to be developed without a public process because developers have elected to build to existing zoning instead of planning a development that will fit the needs of our community and entering the public process for a rezone. And we have those coming to us. We have no teeth in our arguments against use by right zoning if we have not sent a clear message to developers about what this community wants and needs. My ask tonight is that if there is a majority of support on council, that we ask staff to bring back the stamp, code revisions, including subdivision exemption, and renewal and revenue plans to council within the next 60 days. I expect them first to be presented at a study session, and then if council determines they should come back to a regular meeting and public hearing, then council will make decisions at those meetings, final decisions at those meetings. I'm also asking tonight that council approve a planning retreat for Littleton, for council, for Littleton the next 20 years to be held within the next 90 days. If council determines to delay until a city manager is hired, I would caution that we do not know if we will find one with this next search either. I would also submit that Mark and our other key department heads are in place. Upon the hiring of a city manager, Mark will return as Public Works Director. We have a Community Development Director, an Economic Development Director. We have our key staff in place. And a good city manager will be able to enter the system, work with us to continue to move the agenda forward. Littleton deserves our attention. We have a lot of work to do, and I believe we've delayed long enough. If the majority on council do not support what I have proposed, then I would like to have a motion made into the record stating such. And I thank you for your indulgence. I thank you for allowing me the time to share these thoughts.
Support.
Thank you.
I support it as well. We've spent a lot of time doing things that don't make Littleton better tomorrow. And not to minimize any of them, but we have priorities that need to be attended to make a mark in this city over the long term. We've been dealing with short-term issues, and we need to move forward.
The other part is I was asked last week, what is our position with regard to the downtown's stationary master plan, because we're running out of time on our grant for that and the co-funders for that. And so we either move forward or we're going to lose some of our opportunities.
Other comments?
Well, I didn't think we were communicating that we wanted to go back in time or to be stagnant or whatever. We have vision, goals, and objectives that I think are quite clear. We've had some changes in staff that have made it difficult for staff to get up and running. So if we need to change the vision, goals, and objectives, then let's do that. I mean, if we want to. Otherwise, let's just say, let's light the fire.
Comments? Several of these items do exist on the back of the calendar and need to be programmed in. These could be added to the back of the calendar so everybody sees what they are. We're thinking May is really the deadline to do some of these things because of the budget preparations that start in June. And without that kind of, if this is going to have input that's going to be effective, it has to be in advance of budget preparations. So maybe rather than 90 days, it's really a May. This would have to happen to be prior to May. We've redone the calendar, and we have an opportunity now for study sessions, as we were looking today, to fit some of these things into, if they need to be in a study session format. And several of them are items that are truly sitting on the desk waiting to be brought forward. So I think we can move on those. City Manager, do you have any comments to add to that?
Well, I certainly would welcome this. You've heard me say it before, and certainly in some of my correspondence with you, I believe the council's ready for this kind of discussion. I appreciate the point that, the city manager hiring may be several months out. I think the department heads certainly would welcome this. It does add more direction, more stability to the organization. So I think there's lots of things that could be very positive about this. I also have some thoughts about how you might want to approach some of these issues. And so I'd like to give that a little bit of thought, kind of respond back to you. But if your intent truly is to try to tackle this in the next 60, 90 days, certainly would welcome that. I think beyond, once we get into the budget process and towards the end of May, the capacity of staff has really diminished. We spend a lot of time on our budget. And I think it would just be more problematic for us to try to tackle it, say, late summer or the fall. So if you're going to do this, I think now's the time.
So we could plan a get-together other than in a evening planning session that we have scheduled routinely each month. We could get together for a Saturday morning or something like that. But we'd have to figure out some schedules. That takes a little work because there are other obligations I know that some of the council members have on a Saturday or Sunday. So that may not work, but we could certainly do it. We could find a way to do it. One of the requirements for that is a staff who can come back and assist council in the direction and the facilitation of that discussion. And so if we're talking about revenue and economic issues or business incentives, those kinds of things, we need to have the information brought into the room for us to become aware.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a good example, so that's why I want to give that a little bit of thought. I think all these issues, and no doubt there probably are more, but these are the kinds of things that I want to discuss with the department directors to make sure that we can provide you the appropriate information in a timely manner and a follow-up with the process. So if you do set goals, obviously there'd be expectations of specific action steps, I would hope. And so that's the kind of conversation I just want to close internally here and respond back to you.
I'm feeling like council's in support of moving in these different directions. So that's where we're at. I don't know that we need to have a vote, but I think I'm seeing nodding of heads. Or don't need to have a motion.
I'm used to a procedure where the council would, at the first of the year, get together and discuss what their objectives were for the upcoming year. And that would then be distilled into study session topics that the council would then rank on what their priority was. then the staff would take that information and schedule that into the study sessions as we went through the year, depending on the time that they had to prepare for the study sessions and what our schedule was. It seems like we got away from that a while back and have created these goals and policies and objectives that are actually so broad that they're almost meaningless. So I'm all in favor of us going and looking at what we want to accomplish in the next 12 months and then laying that out for the staff to be able to go off and prepare for that and then bring it back to us to make decisions, which would also happen in study sessions. But so I'm perfectly okay with having a meeting, probably maybe a day-long meeting, because we're going to have to, the list that you have is a rather lengthy list, and I don't...
There's probably other things that should be on it.
There's probably other things that need to be on it, so I think the first thing that needs to happen is we need to distill this list down to something that the staff can give us. We then need to have a meeting where we discuss those issues, and then out of that, we need to give direction to staff on which one of those issues we want to move forward on and what our priorities are, and then the staff can take that and figure that in, mesh that into our schedule in the future. So I'm perfectly okay with doing that. That's my preferred way of conducting business. We are in an interesting position because of the start of coming up with budget, and these things are really budgetarily constrained, so we may be at the wrong time of year, but I don't think that should constrain us from at least attempting to take some of these things and work on them.
Jerry?
Yeah, going back to when we were making our goals and objectives a while back, some of us brought pages of goals and objectives. And I remember commenting at that time, and I think, Bill, I think you and I were sort of in agreement on it, is that it was impossible for the staff to get anything done because we gave them pages and pages and pages of priorities. I think, such as the comp plan, we're still not doing anything comp plan, at least that I'm aware of. The Planning Commission is moving forward, but still at a snail pace. There's so many things they could do. I am in favor of this, but we really have to put the list very small and doable. To give these pages and pages of absolute priorities does not work. If we want to make 3 or 4, possibly 5 goals, we can get those kind of things done. But we can't give pages and pages and say, staff, go do our duty for us, please. We've really got to get our act together as not having these lists so that we can sound so big and important in it because we know so much, so let's give pages and pages of what we know. Let's get it down to the financial sustainability of this city is number one. How are we going to get it done? That's number one. The zoning issues, that's huge. That's a big task. It's got to get done. The comp plan's got to get done. Those are 3 things right there that are monumental, and we talk about them. We've talked about them for years, for decades, and it's kind of like the weather. We just talk about it, do nothing about it.
If I may, just to clarify, my intention was to bring back exactly that, the short list, the station area master plan, code revisions, including the subdivision exemption and revenue plans to council within the next 60 days. And then those would be held in a study session, and hopefully at the end of those 60 days, we would be in a position to make decisions about those and have those move off of our to-do list onto staff's implementation list, and then to approve a planning retreat for council within the next 90 days where we would dive deeper into some of these goals and objectives and those types of things. But there's a lot of stuff that is sitting there that has nothing to do with our goals and objectives. They have to do with the things we've already said we want to do. We're just not doing them. And this is just move off that dime, set a firm 60-day and a 90-day expectation. We support it, staff supports it. So we're in sync on that, and we just get it done. Because we just keep saying to be discussed later, to be put on the next, and then something comes in, And we need to stop doing that. We're as guilty as the next guy.
This is the end of February, but it's kind of like Groundhog Day. I mean, we've said this how many times?
I know, exactly.
Just do it.
So just to add to one of the other issues, and that's the code revisions and the zoning. So I'm really not sure what that study told us when we paid the consultants to come in and suggested that we had significant issues to deal with our zoning. I mean, I'm not sure that that's ever risen to an implementation, but what I have become aware of is that, and you've talked about it, is there's some really hot spots in there. There's some places that just absolutely need to be addressed individually, out of sync with a programmatic, systemic kind of thing. B2 might be one of them. Clearly the subdivision issue that we've talked about, which is really a vacancy of property lines, but that's not what it says. And that's been bouncing out there. That's a hot one. And I'm thinking that some of this is not what council has to do other than to get it and act on it and pass it. But it's just hanging out there. Also, we've talked about all of the land use needs to be systemically and programmatically gone through. And I don't know, do we have to put money into it and get a consultant and find expertise to be able to assist it? Because it seems as though our staff is in the here and now with projects and can't get to that review issue. And I think we just are at the point we have to do something different. And Phil has a question.
We deferred a decision on B2 subject to looking at the codes and zoning, and yet we haven't seen anything. And that's why I brought it up earlier. I'm sure that's why Deb is looking at it, because some of the issues that folks are mentioning, that people are talking about in our existing processes, are running without the guidance that we should be in a position of providing. And we intentionally made a decision to say, hey, let's look at it comprehensively, at least in my mind. We did that. We have some items that clocks are ticking on, the stationary master plans, and either, we haven't seen anything, so there's nothing yet for us to decide on, but certainly getting to the next step and taking a look at the downtown plan is something that we've committed to others to do and need to be in a careful position on that. All of these items require some intensity of action or at least decisions on our part. What I heard from Mayor Pro Tem Brinkman in this is we need to be doing a lot of these things somewhere between now and when the budget process starts, which is early in June. And so looking at it between now and then, how that gets precisely staged, looking for some advice on that because staff needs to be in a position to support it. But these are the work of council. Staff is clamoring for direction. We should be in position to provide it, but staff needs to assist in some of that packaging so that we're in a position to actually do our work rather efficiently and not have to do staff's work in the process.
Totally agree, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
What?
I had a great vacation, by the way. I have to admit, I wrestled with this issue over this past week because I sensed the same thing. And when I got back, it was, in fact, I had a short discussion with the mayor about this topic, is that it's time for us to set some direction and to act. And I do believe you are ready. And so this list here, I couldn't have said this any better than what all of you have said here this evening. So I think there is a lot of work. I think the department directors would be very excited about this, to be honest. And so I think I do want to respond to this and provide a little feedback. There are nuances to a lot of this and how we might approach this. I understand kind of the intent here, and so I certainly will execute that to the best of our ability here. So I got to say again, I am pretty excited about what you're saying, to be honest, and staff is ready.
I'm not sure that we're still being realistic at this point, because if we just take one of these issues, and that is the code revision, that's actually a very, very complex topic, and I don't believe that we have given the staff direction enough that they can go off and do anything. There has been a consultant hired. The consultant basically came back, and one of the recommendations was to do away with PD zoning. Well, PD zoning is something that we've done since the 80s. It's throughout the city. It's not trivial to transform and stop from PD zoning and going to something else, and then you still have all those PDs unless you want to actually do what the consultant suggested, that we go down and transform PD zoning into something else, which is probably going to be impossible. So part of my concern with the process is we talk about, we want to go back and redo the code. We have problems with the code. We want to fix the code. But that is such a broad statement that it's almost impossible to expect anything to come back, because staff has in the past taken that broad statement and tried to do something, and what's come back is, in my opinion, been undoable. So if we're going to take this list, I suggest we take one item, pick that one item, and zoning and code revisions and subdivision exemption is actually in the subdivision section, not in the zoning section. So if we want to tackle code revisions, then I suggest we take that as one topic, and it's probably going to take an entire night just to understand what it is that we're talking about and what it is that we're trying to achieve. Because I hear a lot of people say that our code is obsolete and needs to be changed, and I'm not sure that that's true. I think that there may be sections of the code that need to be updated. I think that there's problems that the staff has run against and the citizens have run against and doing rezones, but that's a completely different thing than hiring a consultant that comes in and completely redoes the land use table and then makes a recommendation to get rid of PD zoning and then doesn't understand where the open space zoning came from and wants to combine that with cemetery. I'm just picking some of the things that are the problems.
Well, this is probably why we should have a study session.
Exactly.
So that there can be a discussion about this.
But we need to pick an item and do that item rather than, Jerry was, let's get down from 30 to 5. Well, really, let's get down to 1.
I agree, totally agree.
And start there. And that's a complex enough thing that we'll be lucky to get through one meeting and come out with some direction on that.
Well, I've listed.
We can talk about this till midnight about what we want to do. We should just do it.
I've listed 3 items, one of them which is already done, which is the station area master plan, and that just needs to be brought, be ready for prime time and brought into planning, and then ours. But the other 3 are, that's 60 days. This is what we keep doing. We keep saying, we just keep elongating this stuff. If it's going to take longer than 60 days, that's fine, but we don't know that until we start. We get started on this, and we have a study session, and then we decide we need another one and another one. That's okay, that's progress. But to stop it before we start it, or to downsize it before we start it, I think the list is 50 long, but we've got it culled down to 3 or 4, and a 60-day window to do that. If you need a 90-day window, then that's fine. But we need to start it. By not starting it, we just keep spinning in the mud. I'm done. If we're going to spin in the mud, let's make a motion right now to spin in the mud. And I'm not hearing that from this council.
Second.
I knew it. I knew that's where.
And some of these items are impacting the 2018 budget. So, there's going to be a sequencing and some prioritization that comes from the directors. I'm presuming that's what you meant, Mark, when you were talking about there's some nuances in some of this. But these are items that are important, and we need to be conscious of this rather than being afraid of bringing it to council. We may muck it up in some of that. I agree with Doug.
We will muck it up, but go on.
But I agree with Doug. I mean, some of these things, but the thing is, we haven't even begun to start the cycle of mucking it up. And so in some of this, I think we all know that there's a lot of care that needs to be done when you start talking about land use that defines your city in that. And so it's doing it with care. I'm presuming, you know, we'll get support in that with regard to understanding it, but we need to get moving.
I think everybody has said that at least 4 or 5 times so far tonight.
Yeah.
So we're doing exactly what we say we shouldn't do.
So I call the question on Debbie.
So it sounds, so just to summarize.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So is this the kind of thing we might want to have a special session and really go at each other for a whole Saturday?
Well, the intention was that we would do a visioning Littleton 20 years down the road type of a retreat thing. That does not, these other issues are more, I think, more ready for getting teed up.
But I think the mucking part, it takes a little while to get into mucking. So we might sort of waste 2 hours on a Saturday morning just sort of slipping and sliding just to even begin to touch something. Now, with Jerry there, we'll move faster because he really knows how to crack that whip and not waste time. But I think there's a critical mass of time needed to really get going on this. And I mean that in a positive way.
But if we're looking to have a moderator come in and we put little stickies on little, easels and isn't this great? Spend the day and this is wonderful, and we come up with great pictures. That's just another waste of time. We've done that so many times.
Yeah, no, I'm not up for I don't think you muck when you put little stickies on whiteboards, so I think.
I don't think we need to decide what it looks like tonight. I think we just need to decide that we definitely want to do it, and then we're going to put a timeline for it.
Get it on the calendar and do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Mark, are you comfortable with everything that you have right now on your plate? Do you need any clarifications?
Not at this point, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. And again, I'm just confident the staff is going to be excited about this kind of conversation.
Cool.
Good.
So what's our takeaway? What do we see next? No, I mean, I want to know, when we're going to get a topic, decide on a topic, muck through to decide what topic is important to us. I agree with Jerry. We need to narrow it down to a couple of things, but we do need to bring STAMP forward. We need to have a plan here. And are we asking Mark to bring something back at our next study session report on it?
If I may, I think that's exactly what I would like to do, because I think we need to talk to the other department directors to make sure I understand the timing of some of this. Quite honestly, some of this code discussion needs to happen sooner rather than later. But, some of the STAMP work has been kind of initiated. We've had several conversations with Dr. Cog, so I know there's kind of a schedule roughly for all that. So that one may not take as much time to prep, but and the time sensitivity may not be quite what the council may be anticipating on that as well. So again, I think it really isn't my intent to talk about these issues with the department directors and propose to you what that schedule might look like.
Okay.
So for council's information, we've got on our calendar a couple regular meetings that could be study sessions. And we could begin to move up these topics, and Mark and I had talked about this today. We were looking at perhaps March 7th. It had starting to fill up, but we felt none of those were essential. That could be a study session as soon as March 7th. We also had as we were looking at not filling in but holding back, March 21st could be a study session also. So there's 2 regular meetings that we could use to somehow get moving on these issues.
The city clerk was going to chime in, I think.
I just wanted to remind you that you did a date certain on the block grant for the 7th. So, but we can have a short meeting at the beginning.
And go to a study
And then
session.
go to a study session.
Exactly.
That's not a problem at all.
Also, I think the charter requires us to have a regular meeting once a month, so we can't zero March out completely. So we can mix it, and we can do exactly that. And I think that's, the only way this works is you start to put it in the calendar, as somebody was saying.
Yep.
So there's 2 days that we discovered today that we could fill up with study sessions, because Mark and I were talking about this very issue. So that's a start.
Good.
Okay, so we'd have to announce them and schedule them properly and make sure we get our regular meeting in for March and all those issues, Wendy. So,
Great.
okay. Anything else?
No.
Okay, I just have a couple things. Council's going to be busy next week doing boards and commissions interviews. We're going to be on Monday the 27th, Tuesday the 28th, and Wednesday, March 1st. Wendy, I understand you look like you've programmed some time in for us to make decisions on Wednesday night. Can you comment on that, if you would, just so council, we're all on the same sheet of music.
Our last interview is at 7:20 on Wednesday, and that will give council time after to prepare their discussion and then let me know what guidance you want me to bring back for approval for the next meeting.
Okay, and let me see. I think that's it. We are adjourned, 8:36.
That would